Hi. So in this video, we're going to be going over some things that are a little more advanced in classes. So if you don't have a solid understanding of them, go back and watch the other videos, do a little bit of practice. So there are four things that we're going to cover. The first two are called access modifiers, public and private. The next one is the word static, and the last one, appropriately named final. Okay, and we're going to go over what all of these mean. So first, we're going to talk about public and private. Okay, let me make that a lot bigger. All right. These are extremely important. They might seem like a pain at the beginning, but they're in here for a reason. Java is not the first programming language, and one of the issues in older programming languages is that everything could access every single piece of everything else, and it was awful. Instead, remember how I was talking about encapsulation in the video, I think it was 2 videos ago? I was talking about encapsulation, where only one function, only the function itself, can access or it controls the flow of information in and out. It has the little bouncer, right? This is access, right? You encapsulate all of the functionality inside of this little thing, and it lets stuff come in and come out on its own terms, right? Stuff can't go change in variables and call in functions behind its back. So the way that a function can control the access of other parts of a program is through access modifiers, public and private. Now, there are other ones, but these are the main two that we're going to talk about. So let's start with private. I think private makes a little more sense in the context of what we've been talking about. So when in doubt, you want to put private in front of everything for a class, right? It says the only thing that can call this function, the only thing that can access this variable, the only thing that can change this variable, the only thing that can use this function in its own function call is the class itself. Nothing else can touch it. It's like having I'm going to draw a little wall right here. It's like having a little door right here, and only the VIP guys can get back here and into all the private stuff, right? The private stuff, right? So the reason you have this is because if you didn't, people could change all sorts of crap about your objects, which is not good practice. It just makes stuff spaghetti code. So let me show you how to put that into your code. Actually, first I gotta show you public. Public, on the other hand, allows anyone to come in and use that part of the program, right? So usually you have sort of a setup, right? The public functions and variables are the bouncer, right? You have this bouncer standing there, and he's letting guys come in and come out. These are the public variables and functions, and everything past a certain point is private. Now, you might be asking, well, how do you get from public to private? Usually, there are functions within the class already that can be publicly accessed that will hop in and do private things. And then they'll hop back out and send the information back. It's like when it's like playing telephone, essentially, right? You're like, or no, what's it's like when you go to a restaurant and you're like, oh, I'll have the steak, please. And your order comes in to the person. They go to the back room where they're cooking stuff. They give them the order. They cook it. They give it back to the server. right? And he comes back out and give it to you. You didn't go back into the private room because you would mess stuff up. You get in the way. You might be great at cooking, but you don't know how they do it, and they don't know how you do it. So you just ask. This is the difference between public and private. So let's see how we can change our bug class to be public and private. So for each thing, we're going to ask ourselves, do we want any user to change these directly? Or do we want these to have some bouncer or some sort of guard on them, right? So for the class itself, we don't need anything. Main is the only one that has public in front of it. We can just have a class bug. For our variables, though, you always should put private. Now, for a class like this, like bug, it might not make much sense. Because it's like, well, how are we going to get in and change these things, right? These aren't complex things. So the issues that could pop up don't really make sense. But what if somebody came in here who didn't know how the bug class worked, and they just went ahead and changed numLegs to a negative number? That shouldn't work. That's impossible. That doesn't make sense. What if you have algorithms that depend on numLegs being positive, right? What if color has to be a real color? You can't put in lima bean or something. That just doesn't make sense. So you only allow a certain number of inputs, right? These are things that are guarded, right? This is why they are private. Bug, the constructor, on the other hand, should be able to be accessed by anybody. Because that's how they make your class, right? Public bug. Public bug. Now, real quick, notice how bug has no return type. Usually you would see void. Maybe you'd think it would return some sort of string, or maybe a mem address, or I don't know, a bug, because it creates a bug. It should return a bug. It's implied. The return type is implied. A constructor can return nothing other than a bug. So that's what it returns, a bug. Anyway, so we have public bug, public bug. These are callable by anyone who's using your code. This is their entryway into your program. Grow, that's an interesting one. I think grow is one of those functions that should be accessible to other people, right? If we go and look at, I think that that's a main functionality of a bug, right? And somebody that's using your class to create a bunch of bugs might want to grow them, right? But notice how it's in context of the function, or of the class, right? You call this, but it does the logic for you. You don't go in and manually change numLegs. The class changes the value of numLegs itself, right? Remember, numLegs is private. Only the class can change numLegs. Somebody can't go in and say my bug dot numLegs equals my let me do plus equals 100, right? They can't go in and add 100 legs. It's private. numLegs has private access in bug. You can't do that. numLegs has private access in bug, right? I can't print it out either. And this is to safeguard against negative stuff, right? So what if I said minus equals 100? That'd give me negative, right? This blocks that. Now in here, in this function, we can catch if somebody tries to pass in a negative number. If bonus legs is less than 0, system out print line error negative number of legs, right? Because that just doesn't make sense. They don't grow legs, or they don't grow a negative amount of legs. Otherwise, it edits it, right? And I'll put this in else. Else number of legs, right? So it's either going to throw an error, but this isn't actually throwing an error. It's either going to print out an error and do nothing, or actually change the number of legs, right? And so see how we have to go through some public part of the function in order to access the private parts of the function, right? So we still have an error because we're trying to do this manually, right? So let me delete this line. And I'm going to delete this print line as well because we still don't have access to mybugs.numlegs, right? So I'm going to delete this. It runs, it adds the 18 to it, but if I put in negative 100, negative 1,000, error, negative number of legs. Program doesn't crash, right? We catch this. We catch stupid people using stupid inputs, right? That's what this is all about. Being the programmer who's making this, we know what's up with our code. Other people, they're going to do stupid crap. Okay. So how do we go about printing these out, right? This is where we use these things called setters and getters. This is like a staple of object-oriented code, okay? Usually at the bottom of your code, you have a setters and getters section. Now what setters and getters do, allow users to access variables that they should be able to access, with a catch. It stops them from putting in dumb stuff, like a negative number of bonus legs. So you could say public, because the users are going to, or the other programmers are going to use it, public. Let's do getters first, okay? Public, get, let's do name. No. We're going to do numLegs. Get numLegs. Okay? So what this function is going to do is it's public, and it's going to grab one of the private variables and return it. Not print it. It's going to return it for another programmer to use. So the type that numLegs is an integer. So public integer, because it's returning an integer. We need no parameters. And all we do is return numLegs. Legs. That's it. This is a getter. This is the bouncer. This is the bouncer, right? Now, I can run this, and instead of saying mybug.numlegs, I have to say mybug.getNumLegs. This is an extra layer of protection. 28. 10, 18, prints it out. Right? This function is called from mybug. It gets the number of legs from mybug and returns it. It sends it back and replaces the entire function call with the number of legs, which is 28. And then it runs this line, system.out.println 28. So now let's talk about setters. Setters are the other thing. It allows people that are using your code to set a value, right? It allows them to set a variable. So public, because other people are going to use it. We have not int, void, because this doesn't return something to the person using the function. This just sets something inside of your code. So void set numLegs. Okay? Now for this one, we do send in a parameter, right? We have the number of legs that we want to set it to. So int, I'm just going to say n for the number of them. So we could say numLegs equals n. Nice. Nice and easy. Okay? Now, somebody could say mybug.set numLegs to a negative number, and we don't want that. But this is why we're using setters and getters. We're going to stop the user from doing something stupid like that. So what we're going to say is we're going to do this exact same thing. We're going to use this code up here, and we're going to say if n is less than 0, system.println negative number of legs. else numlegs is going to be set to whatever n is. So now when we run this, doesn't crash, right? Tells the user they're being dumb, and it still prints out the initial value, right? It never changes it to the negative. So those were the first two, public and private, useful for getters and setters and encapsulating your program, making sure that people can't access things they aren't supposed to. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is static. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is final. So let's say instead that we want to keep track of the total number of bugs that we've used. Okay? Actually, I'm going to make a new file for this one. I'm going to make a new class for this. Okay? So, actually, I'm going to make a new video. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a new video. See you in the next one.